Welcome to Good in Motion. I'm excited to introduce my guest, Liz Blanding, a wellness coach, best-selling author, and certified trauma recovery coach. So, Liz has spent over 8 years helping individuals realign their mind, body, and spirit for a more balanced life. She's also the founder of Oasis Wellness Centers and the author of 3 books. So Liz brings a wealth of experience from her own journey and years of coaching others through trauma recovery. Liz, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to get started on this conversation. And to get started, actually, could you explain what a trauma recovery coach does and how someone might know when they need this kind of support?
Alrighty. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Julia, for having me. I have a passion for what I do here, and I help people to understand what emotional intelligence is, and I also help them to cover in a holistic manner. And I glean that from years and years of experience in the trauma field, not only as a professional, but suffering trauma from the womb myself. So I understand
Mm,
trauma from all aspects. And so that's what a trauma recovery coach does. And I'm certified in trauma recovery, addiction, and also abuse. So all of those facets that it brings about a different type of trauma. So
okay.
CDC states that 70 to 80% of us have suffered trauma, and then the 20 to
Mhm.
30% of us are supporting those with trauma. So that means that all of us have experienced trauma in some form or fashion.
And this is really interesting, this data, because we've had already a conversation before recording this interview. And I think that trauma sounds like such a strong word that most people maybe wouldn't recognize that they had trauma. So what is trauma and who has trauma?
Wow. So oftentimes we hit a brick wall, right? Where we're bottlenecked and we don't understand where these emotions are coming from. So the emotions can be triggered by something in the past, right? Most of the time when we've suffered a traumatic incident, maybe, we witnessed somebody that we loved, in a car accident or some type
Mhm.
of violence or, just all there's so many different things that can bring about trauma, but oftentimes we swallow it or we bury it and we keep moving because we're taught to be resilient. We're taught to just fight through, but we're not taught to stop, breathe, give ourselves some grace, and take that time to recover. And if most of us took that time to recover, then we would have better outcomes, right? And so, how do we
Mhm.
recognize it? If something freezes you and you feel like you have to push forward anyhow, but you're almost stuck, right? Or if you are responding, sometimes we'll respond out of our character, out of our personality. That's a trauma response, but we don't recognize that it's a trauma response. We say, "Oh, that's just her," or "Oh, that's just him," and then something will
Mhm.
happen, and it will explode. Or how many times have we heard on the news where somebody says, "This was a quiet person, this was a reserved person," or "I would have never thought this person." That's because we swallowed the trauma. And what we don't understand is trauma is progressive. So it doesn't go away. It sits in us and it festers like old food. And if we don't address it, one day it comes up and it comes out in a very destructive manner.
I see. And you gave very powerful examples with the car accident or witnessing a close one having, I don't know, health issues. Is there such a thing as too little of a trauma?
Too little of trauma, is that what you said?
Some things that maybe someone would think, oh, there's that little thing that happened to me. It's fine, you know?
See, and that's a part of it. And that's where issues like complex PTSD happens, where you have
Mhm.
a trauma that's unaddressed. And it could be something, it could be a loss of a job. It could be loss of a relationship. It could be unresolved grief, right? And sometimes it's things that we may even have witnessed and we don't even realize how it actually affected us or how it actually
Mhm.
infected our cells, right? So it can be something, it can be something that we could just say a loss of a job, for instance, right?
Yeah.
If you've suffered trauma in the past and you swallowed it and you didn't address it,
Mhm.
then the loss of a job can be huge, right? Even if you have another job lined up, you might feel
Mhm.
abandonment issues. You might feel, and it's also becoming aware of our feelings, aware of our emotions, and not discounting them. I think oftentimes we're taught to, put on our makeup, put on our suits, put on all this, and go out there and be this. And I don't think that we've really like found who we are. They used to say finding yourself, but that's real, because if we're
Mhm.
just going along to get along, or going along and not really discovering who we are, understanding our feelings matter, our emotions, we matter, right? And I think in this society, we're taught to go, 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 go like robots,
Yeah.
and we lose that
Mhm.
human side of it. And then things explode.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's a very strong example again because it feels like a lot of people may have experienced it, and yet it can be such a trigger for other emotions. And I know you speak from experience with the loss of a job, and I wonder, you also shared with me that you're a mom, and I wonder, how do you balance being strong, for your family and having to keep going, moving forward, but while also taking the time to unpack everything that happened?
Well, and see, then that's why I am so passionate about trauma recovery, because I started out in my previous career in real estate, in teaching real estate, selling real estate, and such, and helping buyers, right? And I had a horrific car accident where I
Mhm.
slammed it. I say a tree jumped out in front of me. Well,
Yeah.
that caused me the loss of a career, because
Mhm.
I was diagnosed with so many injuries from that accident, and I was a single divorced mom at the time. So I didn't discover, wasn't diagnosed with the complex PTSD, anxiety, depression. I wasn't diagnosed with any of those things at this time. And as I went through, I call it dating my doctors for 2 years, I was at the
Mhm.
doctors every day recovering. Okay. And so I had small children at home. And to be perfectly honest, that is what was my driving force to keep moving forward, because I had a therapist to tell me that she worked with people that had less trauma than I dealt with in life, that she couldn't get them out of the bed. She couldn't get me in the bed.
Mhm.
My not getting in the bed was because I said if I got in the bed, I wouldn't be able to get out. And I felt that the gifts that God had given me, my children, were gifts, and they deserved the best of me. They didn't deserve for me to go sit in a corner and just sit there when they said, well, you're not going to be able to walk if you don't have surgery. You're not going to, you're not going to be able to go back to any of your licenses, or, all of those things can just really crush a person and have you just say, okay, enough is enough. I'm done. But for me, my faith and my children was what kept driving me. And I had to show them that no matter what, you still, as long as you get up and move forward, you can achieve what your purpose. And I knew that I had purpose. So I leaned into my faith, and I leaned into, I must provide for these children. And that's when I started understanding and learning about naturopathic medicine, because the doctors were like, you've plateaued. This is basically your lot in life. Wheelchair
Mhm.
surgery that may or may not work.
Yeah.
And that's it. And I wouldn't accept it. My
Yeah.
mind could not wrap around that.
It sounds so scary, and I think it's beautiful that you found the force to keep going. And so, in this case, what you're saying, just to make sure I understand correctly, is that you push yourself to go hard and to recover, but while doing the work to understand what just happened.
I did. I did.
Okay.
I had to understand what happened, and I have nothing against traditional medicine. I think it has its place, but for me and my strong faith, and I kept reading in Genesis where it says there was herbs, and every herb bearing seed was good for us. And I said, well,
Mhm.
if this is good for us, then it must be something for this pain. So I learned about that herb. I learned about how to create a salve with over 31 herbs in it to help with the circulation and the blood. And I said, wow.
Which you sell. I found out about that. It's awesome.
Yes, yes. So
Yeah.
everything that I present to anyone is because I've utilized it myself. And that also became my pain to purpose story, which I wrote about in one of my books, which you talked about the books, but the pathway to trauma recovery.
Mhm.
I talk about that journey. I talk about what happened, in the accident. And you know what? In all of our lives, all of a sudden can happen, and your life can be so different than what you thought it would be. But what I learned, and when I what answered my question of why so much pain, right? Why so much pain? And I understood now that that pain story, it turned into my purpose. So my
Mm-hmm.
pain went into purpose, and it wasn't just for me. It was to help
Mm-hmm.
other people to see that no matter what you've gone through, you can recover. You can, as long as your mind can grasp it, can conceive it, you can achieve it. And that's not just a saying, it's the truth. But we must uncover the trauma. We must become aware of it. And I think one of the things is because oftentimes society isn't aware of the trauma, right? And that's why that's my polarizing message, to help people to become aware. Because just because you see somebody all made up or the optics look good does not mean that they're not shattered on the inside, and that one word from you can help them to move forward, or one word from you can actually crush them and crush their spirit.
Yeah, I completely believe that. That's why I think we should treat everybody with kindness, because even if they may react in a way that doesn't feel great to us, we don't know what they're going through. So this is
Exactly.
powerful. And what you just say, that your trauma can become your greatest strength in some way, or your purpose. It also makes sense with another one of your services, which is to help aspiring authors to write their first book. I found
Yes.
out, just since our last conversation, I dig deeper in everything you do, and everything is
Yeah.
just connected to that same purpose. And I think it's beautiful that some people are maybe sitting on their trauma, and there is so much potential there, and they could see that as a huge bag that they're just dragging around, but it
Yes.
could become, I believe, based on this conversation, it could become their greatest strength.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then it starts to make sense. I started writing because I started journaling, and my
Mhm.
journaling became the books. So that's a way to get it, I say, up and out. That's my thing. Get the trauma up and out. And oftentimes we swallow it, we sit on it because we feel shame, or we feel less than, or we feel inadequate, or that imposter syndrome kicks in, all of those negatives. And when we turn that into a positive and say, yes, this is what really happened, but I don't have to sit in it. And this is how it affected me. My brain
Mhm.
is wired totally different. I didn't embrace that at one point. Eric Erickson's theory of social cycle development, it teaches us that when a baby experiences trauma in the womb, all of the cortisol and all of those stress hormones makes that an unsafe place. So imagine a baby being in an unsafe space, right? And the baby's
Yeah.
brain can't develop properly. So I used to take that as a negative, right? And I used to be down
Mhm.
on myself about that because I thought so different. I think outside of the box, right? I only think about a box. I'm so creative, and I'll continue to create. But that became one of my greatest assets, because as I was walking through trauma, I was able to speak to individual levels of trauma, and different types of trauma, because I mean, I don't think I've hit all of the gamuts of trauma, but I'm pretty close being diagnosed with complex PTSD, because the trauma as a child was never addressed. And it just kept going and going. Adult trauma, car accident, these things, one thing after the next. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
why a life of pain? But because I channeled it into purpose, now I understand it, and I'm no longer ashamed of it.
Mhm. And who do you help? What is the profile of the people you work with?
Well, and see, my business coaches, they say, okay, you need to narrow down the demographic, right? But it's challenging to narrow down the demographic when trauma has touched, what is it, 70 to 80% of us, and then those that
Absolutely. Yeah.
support it. So I
Mhm.
have men and women in my coaching classes. I have both men and women. I have all ages from 18 up to, I think, 72 is the eldest person in my trauma, my current course right now, my current class. So really is when I talk about emotional intelligence, it's the ability to recognize and understand, manage our emotions, and also others' emotions,
Mhm.
right? So how do you narrow that down to somebody with just, I have people that have gone through, childhood trauma, that have gone through adult abuse, that used or utilized unhealthy coping mechanisms to get through it. And now you have another
Mhm.
layer of challenge if you've turned to drugs, alcohol, if you turn to sex, or if you turn to gaming. In my case, I turned to workaholism, which is also still not great. You know, your body is challenged and you keep pushing through, you can do greater
Mhm.
damage to yourself. So when you say who, unfortunately, but fortunately, I can speak to all of them.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. And also, I can tell you have a big heart, and it feels like whoever you can help and support, you will do that. So it might be hard to put barriers on who
Yes,
is
yes.
eligible for the service. Yeah.
Yes, yes. My heart is to help everybody that I can, under the sound of my voice. My passion is
Mhm.
to help women. It's again another layer of trauma was domestic violence. Not only did I come from a household of domestic violence, but I also in my own relationships as I became an adult. So women that have gone through domestic violence, that's truly one of my passions because I know that
Mhm.
financial trauma is a trauma as well. So I have programs to help us to recover from financial trauma. Oftentimes we stay in domestic abusive relationships because we're not financially able to move forward. So I wanted
Yeah.
to address that issue as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's much needed. Do you think it's possible to do the work before trauma happens?
I think that it is. And then the reason I say that is because awareness, right? If you're aware of something and you prepare, because no matter who you are, no matter what, life is going to happen. The storms happen in life. And if you're
Yeah.
equipped with tools in your tool case or your toolkit, then you're better able to bounce back and recover quicker, right? Than if you don't have those tools. And then you never know who in your family or who in your association or your business, if you're a business leader, to be able to recognize somebody going through trauma and not toss them aside because of the trauma, but to embrace them and support them. You never know what jewel you have inside of your team if you
Mhm.
were more aware, right? And not re traumatizing people by making them feel less than because something happened. I mean, if we break our arm, we don't shame somebody because we broke our arm, right? And they have a cast. But what about an internal wound? Why do we shame
Mm.
because of an internal wound?
Yes, that's a beautiful example as well. Because you're talking about awareness and recognizing trauma, there was something on your website that I really loved. And it said, knowledge is power, and getting trauma informed means empowering yourself with the understanding of how trauma affects the mind, body, spirit, and soul. And then it says, this awareness is crucial for recognizing your triggers and learning how to navigate them effectively. Can you tell us more about this quote?
Right, right. Well, one of my big polarizing messages is that trauma is
Mhm.
not your fault.
Mhm.
Recovery is your responsibility, right? And I say that because even though we give grace for it and we know that it wasn't my fault, that I witnessed some of the violence that I witnessed when I was a child. That wasn't my fault. And as I began to understand that there's something wrong. Life isn't working out, and something is happening here. But when
Mhm.
when we recognize that it's something happening, then recovery becomes our responsibility, right? We can't just sit and say, "Oh, I broke my arm, but I'm not putting a cast on it." No, when we realize that there's a wound, there's something different about us, then grab the help that's available. That's one of the challenging
Mhm.
pieces of the work that I do. It's because there's so much shame around it and folks say, I want to do this incognito. I don't want people to know, but that's a part of your recovery. When I first started talking about some of the challenges that I've gone through, my family members were like, oh no, you don't talk about that
Mhm.
in public. You keep that in. But I say, if you keep it in and you keep it quiet, you get sicker. It makes you sick.
Mhm.
Once you journal it, and that's why I encourage people to write books about it, right? Because when you speak about it and you talk about it, then you're facing it. So you're facing that trauma, right? And it starts to dissipate. But if you keep it quiet, I say when you're looking through the kaleidoscope like a little kid, everything is all jumbled about. But when you start talking about it and you start taking that cover off of it, you start getting empowered. You start feeling
Mhm.
stronger. You start realizing who you are and your purpose. And then you can walk in it more gracefully, and the fear starts to disappear, because that's the big part of it. That trauma response, it pours that fear in you. And so everything, your whole life, does nothing feel safe. Nobody feels safe. But I'm here to say that, that's one of the things that people glean from our programs and our classes, is because they find a safe space. And we make sure, I have a team of trauma recovery coaches, male and female, and make sure that you have a safe space. No matter who you are, you have a safe space to recover.
That's beautiful again. I don't have any other words. I keep saying the same thing, but I feel it. I can understand how important it is, and I'm glad you created these spaces. And I
Mhm.
want to repeat to the listeners that if you went through trauma or and something difficult in your life happens, it's our responsibility to take care of it, to unpack it, and it could become your greatest gift. So that's really important. And
Absolutely.
another topic I really wanted to chat about is emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
Do you think it's a muscle we can grow, emotional intelligence?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The more we lean into it, just like our muscles in our body, right? It's a tearing away of our old beliefs. It's a tearing away of, some of the, I want to go back into the fear that trauma
Hmm.
instills in us, right? It's tearing away of that and bringing on new self-care. It's pouring on new. It's sort of like, I don't know. I heard a song by India Arie. She talked about cocoa butter, right? It's like the
Okay.
soothingness of cocoa butter when you start to really become aware. And that's what I believe in the emotional intelligence portion of it. It is becoming aware so that we can do different, so that we can respond instead of reacting out of that fear base or that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode. We can start to having a better outcome because we understand more.
You know what? I've just realized that each time I talk about emotional intelligence, I think about it in a way that I use it for other people. But
Mhm.
the way you've talked about it just now, it's more being aware of our own, to have intelligence about our own emotions. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
It is. It
Mm,
is. Oftentimes we can see other people, and we kind of, I think we deflect it. So if I'm helping you with your stuff, I don't have to deal with mine. And it
I
sometimes
see.
it's consciously, but sometimes it's unconsciously. Like, oftentimes, especially women, we're such nurturers, and we'll
Mm,
nurture and nurture and nurture other people. Lisa Nichols talked about being abundant in our cups and then giving from our saucer. But oftentimes, even in the emotional intelligence part, we are given from that cup, and then the cup is depleted. For me, even being in the recovery space, right? It
yes.
does not exempt me from those past wounds, but it helps me to get up and recover quicker, right?
Hmm.
And I've noticed that the more and more I lean into the space, the more and more I understand how I'm wired, and start to do that rewiring for myself, the more and more and more strength I receive, the more that I have to give to other people, right? The more that I can bounce back and recover. Even in recovery, we have to understand that when trauma happens to you, it's like a car. That car can be repaired, it can all these things, but it never drives the same. But it's okay that it doesn't drive the same, right? It's
Hmm.
okay that you'll never be the same. I used to be so upset with myself and upset with the trauma. It makes no sense, but this is what I was upset about. I was upset that, like, who could I have been if I had not suffered that trauma and responded out of those trauma responses? Like, what could I have done if I have done the things that I've accomplished, even in this trauma space, right? Getting knocked down, getting back up. Who could I have been without that? But now I've embraced the fact that I am who I am because this happened
Hmm.
to me, and I can help and reach more people because I can do peer to peer. I understand what it feels like. So I can do that peer to peer. So working on myself is helping other people, because when I
Hmm.
work on myself and I understand it, then I can serve more people in a greater voice and in a greater manner, in more strength, right?
This thought is way more empowering than focusing on, oh, what if I didn't have those things? It just, you can't control. It just happened. So now
Right.
what are you going to do with this?
Right.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's five core components of emotional intelligence. One
Hmm.
is self-awareness, two is self-regulation, three is motivation, four is empathy, and five is social skills, right?
Okay.
Oftentimes when you've gone through bouts of trauma and you haven't understand how to self-regulate, you'll get into a situation and then you'll freeze up, or you will withdraw, or you will feel less than, or you will have the imposter syndrome going on, all of these self-defeating thoughts going through your brain, right? But when you become self-aware and I know now when I'm triggered. I know now how I feel. I can feel physically, I can feel the emotion. I physically
Mm-hmm.
get ill, but I can stop and say, take a breather, step back, don't overwhelm yourself. And it's okay to have grace with
Mm-hmm.
yourself. It's okay to sit and close your eyes and breathe. It's okay to think about, I love water. So I think about the ocean. I think about the water, right? And it's okay to have a good cry. It's just not okay to stay there.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the core components, and self-care is a mandatory, because what you just said
Yeah.
about taking care of other people, you can neglect to take care of yourself, to pull back. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about from total experience and from what I've seen with others, coaching others and feeling like a hypocrite because I'm not taking care of myself. And I say, nope,
Yep.
nope, stop. Go take care of yourself. Go get in
Mm-hmm.
a sauna. Go meditate. Put some positive affirmations around yourself. Surround yourself with people like you that care enough to do a podcast about good
Mm-hmm.
emotion. We have a
Thank you.
choice to put, yes, we have a choice to put ourselves in atmospheres that are non-toxic. We say get away from toxic people, places, and things. We can do that. We have a better outcome.
Yeah, we are completely responsible of choosing our environments. At least
Absolutely, we
I
are.
believe once we're an adult and we have more choices we can make. And I
Right.
love that you mentioned that, I used to think that when I just feel, I guess it was perfectionism. It was
Yep.
when I feel that I'm ready, I'll do the thing. Or maybe, I would like to be a speaker. So when I speak on stage, I will just practice until I'm fearless. But what I've been learning more about is that there will be fear, there will be setbacks. It's just we have to keep moving with them, even if it's like breathing before going on stage or breathing before starting the podcast.
Yes.
You've recorded a lot of podcast episodes,
Oh,
so
absolutely. Yes. Yes.
I
You're saying
wonder if you
podcast.
still go. I wonder if you still go through some stress when you record them.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that fear never goes away because you're
Okay.
always
Okay.
looking to be, part of trauma is perfectionism. We try to be
Mhm.
perfect at everything, and I've learned to keep moving forward, to no matter what,
Yes.
just keep moving
Mhm.
forward. Yes. And yes, it just stepped in 60 podcasts in this arena, but I've been podcasting since 2019. So I had over 450 podcasts.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, it's even more powerful that with all that experience, it's still happening. We still have fear and stress and self-doubt, but we need to keep going with all of this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the thing, though. Just know that, and I tell myself this constantly, this too shall pass. So if you're going through a rough
Mhm.
spot or a rough area, go back into some of the self-care techniques, and when I'm constantly putting out, PDFs, I'm constantly putting out checklists on things that we can remind ourselves to do because, again, when you've gone through bouts of trauma and it affects everybody differently because it just depends on when your trauma started or what type of trauma or what environment you came from. I mean, in all transparency, I was set up from the beginning to fail. And had I not had this positive like reinforcement in my mind and leaning into, no, I know this is what scripture tells me, right? I pray and this is what scripture tells me. And I believed it, being a very literal person. So I believe that we're supposed to live in abundance, that, I believe that we can have all the things, right? That we can have all the things. We just, we're supposed to be prosperous. So I took it literally and I believed it. And I did not believe that I kept saying as I was recovering physically that this is not my destiny. This is not what God
Mhm.
told me. I kept over and over again. And, I got in trouble with doctors for it, but I said, no, this is not my destiny. I'm not doomed to sit in a wheelchair for the rest of my life and not be able to move forward with my purpose. Though then I didn't know what it was, but it started to unveil itself. And you still grow, even in recovery. That's why I say allow yourself grace, because even when you're in recovery and all that I've gone through and all that I understand and everything, if you do not take care of yourself, you can relapse. So I also teach relapse prevention. It's an everyday thing. Every day you get up and you get up running. And I say you're either going to be the lion or gazelle. And I don't know who this quote came from, but every day you got to get up running no matter what, right? You have to get up running.
So happy that you kept looking for another option for yourself because the impact you've made since I believe has been gigantic. So that's
Thank
amazing.
you.
Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. And really, I'm just getting started. I have
Mhm.
10 grandchildren, well, nine and another one on
Wow.
the way.
Okay.
So I believe in legacy. I believe in
Mhm.
leaving and living a legacy with your children's children, right? And so now I'm able
Yes.
to grow that with my children. My grandson, who his name is Jaden, he wrote me a little note. He was in one of my podcast recordings with me when I was recording the intro for the new podcast. And he slid
Mhm.
me a note, and the note in the book, the note that he slid me, he was 10 then, he's 11 now. And the little quote, it just really, it touched my heart because it really showed me that I'm making a difference, right? And that the work that I do is helping other people, but my children, my grandchildren, my family, they're all able to glean the benefit from it as well.
And what was the note?
My grandson wrote, Wellness coach Liz Blanding has helped people come out of the shadows and regain their strength because coming from her grandson, me, Jaden, I have known that no matter what, my grandmother will push herself as a great leader. Jaden Blanding.
That's so beautiful. It's
Oh
really
my,
heartwarming.
he
Mhm.
slid it across the table to me, and I said, oh, wait. Oh my
Oh my
goodness. This
God.
is amazing.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
all
this is,
worth it.
yes,
Mm.
absolutely it is.
Well, I think it's a beautiful way to do this transition with a question I asked all of my guests, just to remind everyone to celebrate what we've achieved. Is there a personal or professional win that you had recently that you would like to share with us?
A personal win, actually, Juliet, is being a guest on your podcast, because this is something that I really want to do more of, get the message out to more people. And I believe teaming up with being on other podcasts such as yours. I mean, I love the name of your podcast, right? It just flows with positive energy and just, and that's another thing that I teach people in our courses is make sure that you're listening to podcasts such as yours, because that helps you like to start your day with a positive or end your day with a positive, or even in the midst of some challenges or some tsunamis that are happening, when you can hear other people that are moving forward that are positive, and it helps to rewire your brain in trauma recovery. So this is a great win for me. So I appreciate you inviting me onto your podcast.
Well, thank you. I mean, I want to congratulate you, but I feel like I'm congratulating myself for having you as a guest as well. So I guess it's a shared celebration today.
Yes, it
Um,
is. It is.
for our listeners who have been really intrigued and touched by today's conversation, where can they learn more about what you do and your many resources?
Yes. Well, the Get Trauma Informed podcast is on all major podcasting platforms. Also, email at info at Oasis Wellness CTRS.com or Oasis Wellness CTRS.com, the website.
Perfect. I will share this information so you all have the spelling and links in the show notes as well. Well, thank you so much, Liz, and have a beautiful day.
Thank you as well. I appreciate you so much. Keep up the great work.